It started with a silence. A silence so profound that even the streets of Brentwood seemed to hold their breath. On a Sunday evening, in a $13.5 million estate that had always seemed untouchable, a tragedy unfolded that would ripple through Hollywood, through families, through the lives of everyone who thought they understood the people inside that house. Rob Reiner, Michelle Reiner. Two lives cut down in a way that was sudden, shocking, and, if you listen closely, strangely intimate. It was a scene no one could have predicted, and yet, when we start piecing together the fragments, a pattern begins to emerge, subtle at first, then undeniable. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At 92, Willie Nelson, a man whose voice has carried decades of music, rebellion, and insight, finally speaks. He has remained silent for years about this family, about what he saw, what he knew. And now, the truth is coming out, in whispers, in reflections, in a voice that carries both sorrow and quiet fury. What he says challenges everything you thought you knew about Rob Reiner, about a life that appeared polished and perfect on the surface. Rob Reiner was not the man you think he was, Willie said, and those words hang in the air like smoke in a room no one wants to enter. You might be asking yourself, why now? Why would Willie Nelson, at this age, choose this moment to speak? What could he possibly know that matters so much to the public, to history, to the family themselves? The timing is almost as shocking as the event it seeks to illuminate. And yet, as we peel back the layers, it becomes clear that this story is not just about a murder in an affluent neighborhood. It is about the subtle fractures of trust, the hidden tensions of family, and the contradictions between the life we show the world and the life we actually live. The night of the murders is almost impossible to describe without feeling the weight of every detail. Rob, 78, a man whose career spanned decades in Hollywood, directing, acting, speaking, shaping cultural moments, was found dead alongside his wife Michelle, 70. The bodies were discovered in their own home by their daughter, Romy, 27, who, according to police, made a cryptic statement about a dangerous family member. And suddenly, the neat narrative of a prominent family crumbles into fragments of fear, suspicion, and grief. Nick Reiner, 32, the son who lived in the guest house, was arrested that very night, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. A legal process has begun, but the questions, the haunting, human questions, are only starting. How could this happen? How could someone so close, so trusted, become the epicenter of a nightmare? There is no easy answer. And yet, as we sift through the facts, the rumors, the fragments of testimony, a portrait of a family under pressure begins to take shape. It is tempting to rush to conclusions. Hollywood gossip would have us believe in drama and betrayal, in obvious villains and heroes. But real life, as always, is messy. It refuses to be packaged neatly. That is where Willie Nelson comes in. His perspective is not just that of a friend or a witness. It is the perspective of someone who has lived decades observing human nature, someone whose life experience allows him to notice the small things that others dismiss. The pauses, the glances, the quiet signals that something is amiss long before the storm hits. And when Willie speaks now, he does so with a weight of observation few can match. Consider for a moment the contradiction at the heart of this story. A family so publicly admired, a man and woman celebrated in their circles, a son who lived close enough to be part of daily life. And yet, the result is sudden, violent, and incomprehensible. There is irony here, yes, but there is also tension, a kind of suspense that grips the mind and refuses easy answers. What did Romy see? What did Willie observe? And what, if anything, could have prevented this tragedy? The media coverage in the first 24 hours was a whirlwind of speculation. Headlines screamed, voices debated, social media churned with outrage, confusion, and sorrow. But beneath the surface of public discourse, there is another story, one that requires patience, observation, and careful listening. It is a story of character, of hidden dynamics, of subtle signs that were missed. It is a story that unfolds slowly, like a melody that starts in the low register and climbs, note by note, until the full weight of the symphony is revealed. Willie Nelson's words act as a lens. He does not provide a full confession nor a tidy narrative. He offers glimpses, observations. Sometimes they contradict what the public believes. Sometimes they deepen the mystery. And always, they carry the gravity of someone who has spent a lifetime seeing beneath surfaces. To understand what he says, we must first understand the context. The life of Rob Reiner, the pressures of fame, the nuances of family, and the moments that go unnoticed until the consequences are irreversible. We might wonder, at this point, how a family that appeared so normal could harbor secrets so devastating. How a son could allegedly cross a line from frustration or conflict to murder. How a quiet warning from a daughter could go unheeded until it was too late. And how a music legend, who has nothing to gain and everything to lose, chooses this moment to speak. These are the questions that will guide our journey. There is also the human element, the part that statistics, legal reports, and news footage cannot convey. The fear that grips a child discovering their parents' bodies. The anguish of a community shocked by violence in a place where danger seemed impossible. The quiet reflection of a man who has witnessed decades of human behavior, contemplating what he observed, and finally feeling compelled to speak. In this, the story becomes more than headlines. It becomes a meditation on trust, perception, and the unseen pressures that exist within families. And yet, even as we begin to map these events, we must tread carefully. Nothing is straightforward. Every witness has a perspective, every statement carries nuance, and every revelation raises more questions than it answers. This is not a tale of villainy neatly divided into black and white. It is a spectrum, a tapestry of decisions, emotions, and unseen fractures that lead inexorably to tragedy. By the end of this video, we will have explored perspectives from every angle: the victims, the family, the law, the public, and the singular voice of Willie Nelson. But right now, as the sun sets over Brentwood and the estate where lives were lost, we stand at the edge of understanding. There is a tension here that is almost physical, a sense that the next revelation will shift everything, that the next fact we uncover will feel like a ripple turning into a wave. So ask yourself, as you watch and listen, what is the truth behind appearances? What do we miss when we assume understanding? And how much of what we think we know about people, about families, about lives lived in the public eye, is only surface-level observation, masking realities far darker and far more complicated than we ever imagined? Because the story is just beginning. And what comes next, the details, the insights, the revelations that Willie Nelson offers, will not just inform you. They will challenge you. They will force you to reconsider the lives, the decisions, and the quiet tensions that often go unnoticed until it is too late. And yet, even after all of this, one question remains, echoing through the quiet halls of that Brentwood estate, through the hearts of the family, and through the reflections of those who watched from afar. Why? Why did this happen? Why did it happen when it did? And why, at this precise moment, does Willie Nelson feel compelled to speak? It began like any other Sunday evening. Quiet. Routine. The kind of calm that lulls you into a false sense of security. Brentwood streets were mostly empty, the twilight casting long shadows across manicured lawns. Inside the Reiner estate, however, a tension lingered, almost imperceptible, like the faint vibration of a string about to snap. Rob and Michelle Reiner, a couple known for their presence in Hollywood circles, were winding down. Perhaps they were watching television, perhaps they were talking in low tones about the week ahead. Nobody outside that house could have guessed that, in mere hours, tragedy would strike with a suddenness so complete it seemed almost impossible. Romy Reiner, 27, the daughter who had grown up in the shadow of her parents' careers and reputations, was the first to realize something had gone terribly wrong. The details remained chillingly simple, yet horrifying. According to reports, she discovered the bodies of her parents in their home. The circumstances of the discovery are grim to consider. The silence, the stillness, the sudden realization that her parents were gone, that violence had entered the space that had always been their sanctuary. Her shock, her fear, her disbelief. These are emotions that ripple outward from the immediate family and touch everyone trying to make sense of the events that followed. Nick Reiner, 32, lived in the guest house on the estate. According to initial police reports, he was arrested the same night and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The legal process will unfold over months, likely years, but in that first night, the world was left to grapple with the questions that no official report can answer. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And, perhaps most unsettlingly, could it have been prevented? Reconstructing the timeline of that evening is difficult. Witness statements are still being compiled, police reports only offer fragments, and the family's own accounts are tinged with grief and shock. What emerges from the fragments is a picture of sudden, catastrophic violence. The murders were not random. They were intimate, precise, and deliberate. And yet, the context leading up to that night suggests a pattern that, in hindsight, may have foreshadowed the events. Subtle signs of tension, perhaps disagreements or unspoken resentments, were present in the background, unnoticed or ignored by those around them. The immediate aftermath was a mix of chaos and procedure. Police cordoned off the estate, neighbors whispered, and social media erupted with speculation before official statements could even be released. In Hollywood, a place accustomed to crises, the death of a well-known couple still commanded attention, precisely because it struck at the intersection of fame, family, and horror. Public fascination is almost inevitable in situations like this, but the real story, the human story, is far more complex than headlines can capture. Consider Rob Reiner's perspective. She is young, yet she was forced into a position most could never imagine. The first witness to a family tragedy that would shatter her life. According to preliminary accounts, she mentioned to police that there was a dangerous family member who should be suspected. That statement alone is laden with implication. It suggests foresight, awareness, and a grim understanding of the family dynamics that others may have overlooked. Romy's role is crucial because it shifts the narrative from an abstract tragedy to something intensely human. A young adult forced to confront horror in the place she should have felt safest. And then there is the question of motive, or perhaps motives. At this stage, investigations are ongoing, evidence is being collected, and experts are weighing in. The initial focus, naturally, is on Nick Reiner. Living on the property, being intimately familiar with his parents' routines, having proximity that enabled the crime. These facts raise suspicions. But motive is rarely simple. Anger, resentment, perceived slights, financial pressures, or psychological strain can all play a role. What is clear is that whatever caused the violence, it was potent enough to shatter a family in an instant. As investigators began to piece together the night's events, they found themselves confronting not only the crime itself, but also the complex web of relationships within the Reiner family. Friends, neighbors, colleagues. Everyone had their own version of the family narrative, and often these narratives contradicted each other. Some spoke of a harmonious household, a couple devoted to each other and their children. Others mentioned subtle conflicts, quiet tensions, things noticed only in hindsight. This is where the story deepens, the collision of perception and reality, the contrast between public image and private life. Amid the chaos, one voice remained unexpectedly clear: Willie Nelson. At 92, he had seen decades of human behavior, watched the rise and fall of people, observed the subtle signs that most of us miss until it is too late. And now, he chooses to speak. His observations provide context, not sensationalism. He does not offer speculation for entertainment. He offers reflection, insight, and a perspective grounded in experience. When he says, Rob Reiner was not the man you think he was, it is not hyperbole. It is an assertion that invites scrutiny, demands attention, and sets the stage for revelations that will unfold gradually, piece by piece. There is a peculiar tension in this story, a kind of uneasy anticipation that lingers even in retelling. The Reiners were known, respected, admired. Their social standing, their accomplishments, their public personas suggested a life insulated from tragedy. And yet, violence intruded, unstoppable and devastating. The contrast is almost unbearable. The peace of a Sunday evening versus the horror discovered in its aftermath, the public perception of a happy, well-ordered family versus the private reality of fear, tension, and ultimately, loss. It is impossible to ignore the human elements, the grief, the shock, the disbelief. Family members must navigate a world that suddenly seems incomprehensible. Friends must reconcile their memories with this new, tragic reality. And the public must confront the uncomfortable truth that wealth, fame, and influence do not inoculate against tragedy. These layers create a narrative that is as emotionally complex as it is shocking. And yet, even in this first chapter of the story, a question looms. What signals were missed? What warnings, subtle or overt, could have indicated that something was amiss? Romy's statement about a dangerous family member is one piece of this puzzle. But there are others, moments and details that will emerge only as the story unfolds. The narrative is a slow burn because reality is rarely immediate. Understanding takes time, and insight comes gradually.